That was great, right?
Wasn't it?
It was so great. We've talked about the challenges of inclusion, and there's another challenge teachers face, which is getting teenagers to speak in the classroom.
Right?
They might be insecure or afraid of peer judgment. So, to help us figure out what motivates teens to speak, is our most frequent speaker at Cambridge Day, Brazil, Herbert Puchta, with his talk, Helping Teenagers Become Confident and Engaged Speakers. Herbert. Welcome. How does it feel to know you're our most frequent flyer?
Sounds frightening, actually.
Is that on? Let's try it again. There you go.
No, it's working now.
Yeah.
It's working now.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your introduction.
Of course.
And hello, Sao Paulo.
And you were here the first time. In 2001.
It was in 2001.
Yeah. So how does it feel to know you were in the first?
It's great to be back. I'd like to thank Cambridge for bringing me back. But I'd particularly like to thank you for being with us today, because without you, this would be a rather sad event, wouldn't it?
Exactly. Enjoy.
Thank you.
If you need us, we'll be right here.
Okay, lovely. Thanks very much. Well, this is all about teaching adolescents, teenagers, and it's all about something that many teachers agree on can be rather challenging, and that is to get them to speak, not to chat with their neighbors, but to speak aloud and to make an active contribution to the classroom. I'd like to start by telling you a little anecdote. It's embarrassing, it's personal, and it's all about my hair. When I was a young child, my hair was blonde, not the kind of blonde that it is now. It was really blonde and it was very curly. And I had, when I was 3 or 4 years old, my hair was curly and came down to the shoulders like this. When my parents decided it was finally time to have my hair cut. Now, these days, with our mobile phones, we would, of course, take several photos of such a situation. Well, my parents didn't, but what they did was they kept a curl, they kept a lock in a little box, and my mom gave it to me years later. And I recently found it somewhere in a drawer in my study. And it actually triggered off a memory which is all about my teenage years. So when I went into adolescence, which in those years was more or less when a young person turned 13. Experts on child development these days actually say that adolescence starts, what do you think, earlier or later? Well, actually, they say it starts much earlier. As early as 10 young people go into adolescence, and it lasts until they're 25 or even longer, right? So anyway, this is my anecdote. When I turned 13, I became a bit self-conscious all of a sudden. And I thought, well, I'm not really sure what other people think of me and whether they actually like my looks. And one worry I had was that my curly hair was probably something that other people didn't like at all. So I was faced with a real challenge. I saved up my pocket money and I bought lots of hair cream and hair gel, and I put it on probably several layers. It didn't change anything. But then one day, I was looking at the window of a barber's shop, and I saw something that I'm sure not many people have seen. It was a hair net, kind of a nylon net, which when you put it on your head, looked a little bit like a bathing cap. And it had two ribbons so you could tie it around your head. I'll never forget. I went to bed, and before I went to bed, I put this hairnet tightly around my head. I tied it really tightly. The next morning I woke up, I was totally excited, and I was absolutely sure that this was going to be the first day of my new life. Okay? No curls anymore. I ran to the bathroom, I looked in the bathroom mirror, and I slowly untied the hairnet. I took it off, and I noticed a significant difference. There was a red streak running across my forehead because I had tied the hairnet so tightly around my head, but otherwise there was no difference. Well, you may not know why I've been telling you this strange story, and we'll leave it at this, and I will come back to it later, and hopefully it will make sense a little bit later. Let's now look at the areas that we'll be covering in this session. We can tick the personal anecdote. The next one is 3 myths about teen years. 3 beliefs many adults have about teen years, beliefs that researchers say are actually not justifiable. The next one, 3 reasons why it's so difficult, or why it can be so difficult to encourage teens to talk. 3 qualities we need to draw on in our speaking lessons. And last but not least, a few practical suggestions. I don't think it will be 5 for time reasons, but we'll do maybe 3 or so towards the end of the talk. Adolescence is a time of change. We can see that when we look at them. Their bodies change. But what also changes is their inner world. And that actually reminds me immediately of Earl Stevick's famous dictum that success in the foreign language class depends less on materials, techniques, and linguistic analysis, and more on what goes on inside and between the people in the classrooms. It's what happens inside of them that creates lots of challenges. And maybe the biggest challenge of them all is the fact that they need to find out who they are. They need to find out who they're going to be. Their search of their identity, which is not such an easy thing. I believe that we need to become aware, and I'm sure that many of you are, that it's not only materials, it's not only the language we teach and the methodology we use that helps us to reach out to them. It's also about creating a classroom culture that actually caters for what is really going on inside of them. And that's what we're going to look at here. The first huge myth is sometimes we often hear, okay? It's all about raging hormones. Those raging hormones create the biggest changes in their lives. Well, hormones, of course, do play a certain role, but you can talk to any endocrinologist you want. None of them will tell you that it's the hormones that turn our little children who are chatty and who love communicating into those stony-faced automatons that they can become at times, okay? The second myth is about adolescence being a terrible time, and we can only wish for it to go away as soon as possible. We hope for it to, hope for our teens to be able to grow up and grow out of it with hopefully as few scars as possible. It is a challenging time. It is a time when they actually need to take risks. And we also know that sometimes they take risks without considering the possible future outcomes of their decisions, the decisions they're making now. So it is a time of risks, really, but it's also a time that gives us as their teachers wonderful opportunities to respectfully influence them, to help them with their development, and to create that classroom culture that our students want to belong to. Daniel Siegel, an applied psychologist, says that a central idea is that in very key ways, the work of adolescence, the testing of boundaries, the passion to explore what's unknown and exciting, can set the stage for the development of core character traits that will enable adolescents to go on to lead great lives of adventure and purpose. So whatever they are able to achieve later on in life gets somehow initially planted in their teen years. And Lawrence Steinberg has just gone. No, he is back. Adds to that adolescence is not a deficiency, a disease, or a disability, but it's a stage of life when people are less mature than they will be when they are adults. Now, let's have a look at the last myth, and that is something that some parents and teachers alike sometimes become very sad about. All of a sudden, it seems to them their young daughter, son, or adolescent student wants to be completely independent of adults and wants to just carry on leading their own independent life. Well, actually, research clearly shows that this is the time when they need to learn to become more independent. They need the space that helps them to develop this kind of independent thinking. They are not the little children anymore, dependent on their parents and their teacher. They need to develop their own identity, as I've said. But if we do that respectfully, if we create a classroom culture where they feel accepted, not just as the learners of the present perfect progressive, but as human beings that the teacher is interested in, where the teacher wants to hear what they have to say, rather than just working on the correctness of their language only and all the time, then we can actually really support them enormously in the development of their own personality. We are a bit too big here as a group, and I don't actually see you very well at all, so I can't turn this into an interactive session now. But I would like to ask you to turn to the person sitting next to you and just have a little chat for 1 or 2 minutes about what you believe the reasons are why it can be such a challenge to motivate them to speak. Would you just take 1 or 2 minutes, please? Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. As I've said, we can't listen to the reasons you have come up with, but hopefully what you have discussed will somehow be mirrored also in what we're going to look at now, which is 3 reasons why it's so difficult to encourage, or it can be so difficult to encourage teens to talk. The first one has to do with us, I believe, and that's their worry about not being taken seriously. Tongue in cheek, I might share a little image with you that hints at what I have in mind here. This is only a joke, but you know what I mean. And I'm not talking about anybody in here. I'm only talking about a few teachers out there. I believe that the foreign language class frequently is the only context where students seem to give seemingly meaningful answers to completely meaningless questions. It starts when they're very young. What color is my jacket? How many fingers can you see? What am I doing now? Etc., etc., etc. Well, we know that if I spoke Portuguese, I don't, unfortunately, and I went out after this talk into the streets and I asked the first person coming up to me, excuse me, what color is my shirt? They would probably not say white or green or blue or pink or what have you. They would probably call the ambulance or the fire brigade or the police or João Madureira, and they would tell him that one of his speakers has gone mad out there in the streets of Sao Paulo. We don't normally ask a question like that in the adolescent classroom. But very often questions are asked where the teacher already has the fixed answer at the back of their mind, where we only listen to whether the answer is linguistically correct or not, and we don't care so much, I shouldn't say we, those teachers out there don't care so much for the content, the message, what they want to say. The second one, lack of trust, and that can also be about us. Let me share with you a very interesting experiment, but before we do that, let me remind you that the teenage years are about an emotional roller coaster. They can be extremely happy and bubbly and excited in one moment and fall into deep depression the next moment. And so there was this fascinating experiment which I believe offers a lot of food for thought, where researchers, psychologists had groups of children, adolescents, and adults. And they showed them pictures of faces, human faces. And those, more or less a third of those pictures were pictures of neutral faces. Another third were pictures of very positive faces, happy, excited, etc., etc. And the last third were pictures of people showing negative emotions, anger, sadness, depression, what have you. And the task for the participants was they had three buttons, three buzzers in front of them, and they were told, whenever you see a face which is negative, you press this button, you press the button in the middle for neutral faces, and the button on your right for positive emotions. And it was fascinating. Adults and children, more or less, and sometimes even to 100% agreed on which were the neutral, the negative, the positive faces. With adolescents, there was a striking difference. Quite frequently, adolescents actually interpreted neutral faces as negative. So that is something to bear in mind when we enter the classroom or before we enter the classroom. You might be thinking of something completely different. You might be in your thoughts be dealing with something that is not about this class, and you may not be aware of the importance of this moment for your learners. They look at you and they might actually listen to what Dan Siegel says here. The result for teens can be an inner sense of conviction that even another person's neutral response is filled with hostility and he or she cannot be trusted. I worked with a group of teachers in another country not long ago, and one colleague said, "But I don't want to smile when I come into my adolescents' classrooms." And she got a little bit angry when I said, "Well, I understand. Fake it." And I didn't mean fake it in the sense of just be an actor. What I meant was become aware of the importance of kindness. A smile on the teacher's face creates a completely different classroom atmosphere, and that's something I think we need to have in mind. Why is it that adolescents interpreted those pictures so differently from adults and children? Why? Well, because there are two ways of making decision. The first one is a slow way. It engages the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that is responsible for critical thinking, reflective thinking, logical thinking. The prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain that is not so well developed yet with many adolescents. And this is also the reason why neurobiologists these days say that adolescence can really last until 25 or even longer. For two reasons, by the way. One seems to be about social media and screens. And the second one, psychologists say, has to do with the fact that children these days have far fewer responsibilities. So they don't need to become mature as early as children maybe in the old days. The second way is much faster. It bypasses the prefrontal cortex, and It is directly related to the emotion centers in our brain. So it's a very impulsive reaction and decision, and this is what adolescents often do. So this is already what I have mentioned. And the third one is fear. Fear of who? We might ask. Fear of what? Well, this often has to do with their peers. So sometimes colleagues say, well, it's about fear of making mistakes. And we will look into this a little bit more closely. This is about another study carried out at Harvard University under the guidance of Leah Somerville. And again, what they had here was a group of children, a group of adolescents, a group of adults. People were asked to take part in this experiment where they were supposed to lie passively in a brain scanner. And they were given, those sensors that were fixed on their heads. But there were also sensors fixed on their skin. And before they went into the scanner, they were told, all you need to do is lie there and that's it. And then they gave them an extra bit of information. Whenever you see this red light blinking, that is a signal to you that somebody of your own age is watching you in a screen from a room next door. This wasn't true at all. It was just the experiment. But the results, the outcomes are fascinating. While the children and the adults couldn't care less when the red light started blinking, there was no difference in skin reaction, no difference in brain activity. The adolescents, whenever the red light started blinking, showed very, very strong reactions. First of all, skin reactions, okay? So there was a lot more sweat produced whenever that red light came on, which is a clear sign of stress. And the other reaction was in the medial prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain that we engage when we think about what somebody else might think about us. That part of the prefrontal cortex lit up like a Christmas tree, okay? So they were very worried, thinking, what is that person? What is he or she thinking of me? Now, this is what Sarah Jane Blakemore comments on the results of these studies. These physiological effects in the brain and elsewhere in the body suggest that thinking you're being observed or anticipating being observed by a peer makes you self-conscious, and these effects are more pronounced in adolescence than in other age groups. Okay? So I hope that at this point of time, my hairnet story makes sense. Fear is about the worry they have concerning what other young people, members of their peer group, might think about them. Not being liked by others leads to existential fear. It's threatening for them not to be liked by their peer group. So as a result, they often suffer from a terrifying and indeed existential fear that they might be rejected by their classmates. So let's have a look at what we might want to consider if we want to to take these 3 points seriously. So here's a little recap. The first one, as I said, is the worry about not being taken seriously. And I think what we need to do there, we need to take into consideration that we can show them that we are taking them seriously by, as the colleague up here in the discussion, in the previous discussion, Giovanna, is that correct? When she said about let's not lower expectations, okay? We need to actually have high expectations in our teenagers, so challenging them intellectually. And Jay Geert stresses that the plasticity of the brain is never better than in their teenage years. The plasticity of the teenage brain suggests that constructive dialogues with teens about issues such as freedoms and responsibilities, those are just examples, can influence development. So we need real topics. We need to take them seriously, and we need to show them that we are interested in what they have to say, and not just, as I've stressed 2 or 3 times, in how they say it and whether they say it correctly and incorrectly. And the third one, lack of trust. This has to do a lot with the kind of classroom culture we manage to create, or we fail to create sometimes, okay? So it's all about giving them emotional support in 2 ways. First of all, by being kind, smiling at them, keeping eye contact, being kind, being a good listener, etc., etc. And the second one is all about respecting their emotions. I spoke about the emotional roller coaster previously. They have lots of new emotions that pop up all the time. Sometimes they don't know how to handle those emotions because they are new to them. And so even very positive emotions like falling in love for the first time, what could be more beautiful, can be rather threatening to them, actually. And they are also not very selective when it comes to choosing their words, okay? So, for example, here we have this young boy and he says, I can't believe it. I've studied a lot and have failed again. Sugar. We don't want to hear sugar from their mouths. Of course we don't. And we think, they should know how to behave. Well, actually, they are so emotional that when the guy says sugar, it's an expression of what they feel. And a lot depends on how we react. We can, of course, tell them off for saying such a word. But we can also try and just support them by showing that we understand how they feel. So I could almost cynically say, maybe you should have started studying earlier. Might be true, but it's not very supportive. I could say, that's an interesting one, because teachers often feel they need to solve the students' problems, which is not a good idea and impossible very often. So it's not about, putting a Band-Aid on their wounds, so to speak, like, oh, don't worry, I'm sure you'll do better next time. That doesn't help them, because they are seriously emotional about it. While help me understand, tell me what you've tried so far, maybe also tell me how I could be of help. Or here, I'm very sorry to hear that. That must be so hard for you. So that's a totally different quality in how the teacher reacts to the students' emotions. And the fear of being rejected by the peer group, That is all about psychological support. It's all about what we call social emotional learning. We know if a teacher manages to create a classroom where students do not only respect the teacher, but respect each other, that will not only be a happier place for our students, it will also be a place, and there is a lot of empirical research that clearly shows that, where students achieve better academically. So it's worth investing in our students' well-being, so to speak. Teaching them to be kind is a key thing. Not always easy, and it might sound a little bit like flower power teaching. When I, for example, say that what I use frequently when I work with teenagers is, for example, little gratitude rituals, where I start and give them a model and I say, for example, today I'd like to express my gratitude to name of a person because. And if I take that seriously, if they can feel that I'm honest and I'm serious about what I say, then it's easier to say, would you like to show that you are grateful to someone else in our class? They might be a bit shy initially, but if you do these things not just once as a gimmick, but regularly, then you will notice a change in the classroom culture. Then we have also catering for their specific psychological needs. They need space. They need to be able to make choices occasionally, small choices, okay? Would you like, for your homework, would you like to do this or that? Would you like to act out your role plays now? Or do you want to practice with a partner first and we'll do it a bit later, etc., etc., etc. Give them choices. There's also a desire for a bit more of privacy. They need their secrets. That is important for adolescents. And a greater focus on peer relationships. Buddy learning is a concept that I will mention my book on tips for teaching teenagers. There's a whole section on these things there and a page on buddy learning. I'd like to share 3 concrete examples, concrete activities with you now. The first one is a bit crazy, as you will see. It's an activity that I use quite frequently and regularly, again, not as a one-off gimmick, but it's an activity that could kickstart a different attitude when it comes to speaking activities. It's also an activity that gives them a reference experience of a moment when they are speaking and they're taking risks and they don't care, they're not worried about what others think of them. I don't know if you have ever heard about the Greek orator called Demosthenes, who was one of the best speakers in ancient Greek. He was actually a person who initially, when he was an adolescent, he was extremely shy. And there was a particular reason for that. I think, from what I've read, that he had a lisp. So he was worried about what people were thinking about him. But at the same time, he had this big dream of being a real orator, of somebody who might, enthuse other people, who might inspire other people through his speeches. So in his mind, he was developing a dream of being a great speaker. So what did he do? He actually went down to the seashore, and it was quite a noisy beach because it was a pebbles beach. And he started giving talks For hours and hours, he was standing there talking to the waves, trying to be above in the volume of voice, above the noise of the waves. I'd like to do this with you as an activity. Are you ready? Okay. So what we're going to do now, in a moment, I will ask you to stand up all at the same time, and I will ask you to give a little speech. This is your topic. You don't need to agree with that. You can say this is the most boring Cambridge day ever, and the speaker in front of me is the most boring speaker ever, whatever, yeah? Or when you run out of ideas, you just include that in your speech. Nobody can listen to you. Why? Because everybody will talk at the same time, loudly as possible. Use your voice projection, please, and try to be louder than the waves of the sea. Are you ready? Stand up, please. Let's have a little bit of fun. Okay. I hope the technology works. Here we go. And you stop when I stop the sound of the waves. Ready? Ready? Here we go. Thank you. Do sit down, please. Thank you. Don't use it as a one-off gimmick. If you want to use it several times, and it can be the warm-up to a real speaking activity. It's fun. There is no danger that they feel observed by the others, and so on.
I wish I'd stayed in bed. Yes, I did. If only I hadn't gone. Uh-oh. And sat down in his car. In his car. In his car. I had a feeling then. Yes. That we wouldn't be going far. Oh, no. I wish he hadn't shouted. As I drove into the street. His shouting made me nervous, so nervous, and I mixed up both my feet. If only I had put, my foot down on the brake. Oh no. Instead, we sped straight ahead. A pretty big mistake. Big mistake. If only they hadn't planted that enormous tree, it was massive. It stopped our car from going far. And Dad was mad at me. Mad at me. Now lesson 1 is over. And lesson 2 can wait. Yes, it can. Yes, it can. There's time for everything in life. Yes, there is. And that's why life's so great. So great.
Like it?
To express regret about the past, we can use...
Okay, well, this is from our book for adolescent learners. When I say our, then I'm also talking about Jeff Stranks, my co-author who is here, and we have another co-author, Peter Louis Jones. These are the covers of Think, actually American Think. As many of you know, there's also a British a version of it. I don't have the time to go into any of this. Asking the right questions is, of course, something that is important. I'd like to finish off with a quotation that comes from Earl Stevick. Oops, how can I go back? Can I go back? Yes. Comes from Earl Stevick, the scholar who was talking about what is really important is not materials, techniques, or linguistic analysis, but what goes on inside and between the people in the classrooms. And here Earl says, these then are two dimensions within which you'll be of greater or less help to your students, developing their communicative competence and perfecting their linguistic competence. There is, however, a third dimension without which these first two can lead at best to an academic, flat, sterile achievement. The question is whether as teacher or how much as teacher you can hope to help your students in this third dimension. I'm not sure, but let me set before you briefly what I see here. The third competence is personal. I think that's a key thing when it comes to the teaching of adolescence. Let me just also, if I may, point out two books that they also have a few copies out of there. One is 101 Tips for Teaching Teenagers, and the other one that I had the pleasure to write with the wonderful Sarah Mercer, 101 Psychological Tips. Thank you very much.
That was great. Thank you. I think not only as a teacher, but as a mother of a teenager, I think I learned a lot today, especially the roller coaster of emotions. And sometimes she doesn't really know what she's feeling. And I try to help her understand what it is she's feeling. Yeah. So thank you. We don't have time for Q&A. We're going to let you go to the break. But Herbert, you have to wait.
You have to wait.
Because we have a gift for you.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yes.
I love gifts.
Yes, because you are our most frequent speaker at Cambridge Day, Brazil. You've been to 14 editions, if I'm not mistaken.
It's only a question of age.
Exactly. And in Brazil, we have this tradition of when someone that's not Brazilian comes a lot and means a lot to us, we like to give them an honorary citizenship.
Oh,
So we'd like to present to you your Brazilian ID card
thank you so much.
as a token of our appreciation and recognition for everything you've done for Cambridge Day.
Thank you very
So
much.
there he is, Herbert, is now Brazilian.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Obrigado.
Yes, good job. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, everybody, we're going to break. Our last break of the day, so enjoy this time to chat. And then we have more coming, and don't forget the raffle at the end, okay?
Yeah.
We'll be back at 4:25. Thank you.
Thank you.